Hello everyone. 30 years ago today, the very first episode of X-Men animated series aired on Fox Kids. It's kicking off with the two-part Night of the Sentinel storyline. And today, we celebrate 30 years of the series, and even though wasn't able to watch every episode like I was hoping to for this, I do remember the series quite fondly. And in fact, it's actually one of my favorite shows growing up, and I think it's definitely good times any with the X-Men 97 revival coming to Disney Plus next year and increasing hints about the characters joining the MCU. So let's begin. Even after all this time, that theme song still is just fire. With not only are James Von Shuki Levy workshopping all the things they would do flying with Power Rangers, and those later in the decade with Digimon on Communist States. There was. It definitely made a good effect of like showing us not just the X-Men but also the Rogues that they're going to be facing. And I have no formal opinion about the Linda situation either. I wasn't even aware that show even existed before the suit was even filed. Especially how this is, even when at the time it was an IP that was beloved by generations and fans. And another little side before I officially get started is that they've actually been trying to get one off the ground ever since the 80s, with one notable example being like they tried the X-Men pilot, which did not get picked up, though it did influence the excellent and Konami arcade game. I can still solo on that one as Dazzler of all characters, so let's officially begin. Though many of the storylines were unique to the show, a lot of them also did pull from a lot of the comics they had published at the time, and the art direction also took a lot of influence from the Jim Lee run in particular, with how poppy some of their outfits are, especially with the first member of the team we actually end up seeing, Jubilee, who's in foster care, and not really clear in this version, but it's clear that who she's staying with have had at least a year before the events of the story, and so it depends on the writer, but sometimes her actual parents died, or sometimes I just had to give her up, But anyway, as the Sentinels begin roaming the streets, searching for mutants to apprehend just for existing, not really much of a stretch anymore. Her adoptive parents aren't sure what to do, but given how her foster father pointed to the entertainment center and a shard, it's like saying look out to the VCRs by touching it. Well, probably like eligible explanation for that, sir. It's probably made by Samsung. And the Sentinels are tracing her to a shopping mall where she's trying to collect her thoughts, and I'll admit, the arcade game she's playing and subsequently it shorts out. Definitely shows how she's still trying to learn how to focus her powers, and I also kind of like how even though most of the characters are adults, like she being a teenager, like young enough that the audience can identify with them, but just old enough they can still look up to them in a way. And do a good job introducing how the X-Men are able to intervene before she's captured. Her showing how Storm, Gambit, and Cyclops, to name a few, where apparently they still want to make the off-delayed Gambit film, and Channing Tatum still wants to play him. I'm very much open to that idea. Yeah. And they also do a good job at introducing not just big names in the compound like Xavier, Jean Grey, the Beast, Hank McCoy, and of course a very medic Wolverine, which even if you never saw the show, you might like have seen some of those macros looking at that photograph up on his bed. And also there's the comedic more for me, a character I'm not entirely familiar with, but can definitely tell him watching TV making fun of the perfume commercials and what he saw on the news as well, so admittedly not a stretch. Still, even if he's not my favorite character, knowing what happens to him definitely makes this series stand out. Yeah. Way, it did plant the seed that would take root over many years, subsequent adaptations, both on the big and the small screen. And like sometimes there are things they can't dance around, and some of the trappings are products of their time, like some of the zingers, and like the what I mentioned about the arcade cabinet in the VCR, the mall, arcade cabinet mall in the VCR. But and the situation on screen is treated as such. And as for the team name, one half it could be like the X would be like the unknown mathematical number, or to represent how there's a lot of details about the mutant gene that are still to this day unknown, beyond manifesting when someone comes of age. And I think I always thought of that even subconsciously like a unit of fighters, as in, so to speak, men, you're all going on this mission to DC. Some of you might not come back. Remember that. It's not just a joke. What I'm about to discuss is going to get pretty heavy. Second part of the storyline aired the following week on November the 7th, 1992. And also who showed the second part where they're having to go to the Mutant Registration Agency to get rid of the files they have on them, as well as other ones that could be targeting. But while most of the team they sent is able to make it out alive, it actually took some brass to actually, even if it was a comedic character who was pretending to be a Calvin Klein model and laughing at his own jokes. They actually killed him off in the very first storyline, which to establish the stakes of how this happens. Like sometimes you're about to fight, you don't always come back. Heck, and even though he does come back a later storyline, which is a whole nother kettle of fish, it definitely does a good job, and even the animations have a lot better than I expected. I mean, watching this just on my main display out in my living room, they managed to upconvert this to 1080p. It looks really good. I mean, also definitely has a lot of similarities to like how you see some anime in terms of the lighting, the poses, and the color schemes as well, which the arcade game overlapped as well. I mean, which is kind of a natural progression of seeing a Western IP being seen through a Japanese lens as well. And that's not to say that even after Morph bites the dust, there's still some levity. When before, as Jubilee gets captured, taken to Detroit, and Wolverine goes out to find her, cutting the roof off of Cyclops' car, and dryly saying, tell him I made him a convertible. And Jean is also still bereaved the loss of her comrade. Even I can't resist joking like, oh sweet, a convertible. Oh man. And yeah, and like I said, the fact that they're finally getting back into the MCU in the near future after all the red tape is clear of Fox with, I definitely am seeing some similarities as like how like some of the casual pop culture references, like the humor being more deadpan, often comically serious, like how even as people are being attacked, including some acting like jerks in a bar. I mean, which does make sense. I mean, if anything, the most realistic thing ends up being the most frightening about it. I mean, you may not encounter many people that can manipulate metal or robots the size of a building, but it's the idea to be targeted because of just who you are as a person, solely for existing, is admittedly not a stretch anymore. And I will say, that even as times change, the parable of the mutants and for humanity gets more and more effective with each passing decade. Yes. So, as Jubilee is rescued, who she agrees to come study at the Academy for the Gifted, uh, wishing her foster parents well. And when asked about visiting, like, does Mulvey beat chili fries in response? I'll take that as a yes. And so ends Night of the Sentinels and begins X-Men the Animated Series. And I must say, watching this again, as in the also I've been watching other episodes in between other projects to get ready for this video, which I've been working on for a while, planning for anywhere from a month to the last few years. It's helped a lot what I expected. I mean, sure, some of the trappings may process their time, but the story and characters remain good, and I will say that even as action animation has migrated to platforms, the impact the series has left is still quite notable. It inspired the X-Men 92 comic series, which is quite good, and naturally, the revival being X-Men 97, which is when the last season aired, it's definitely a good call given how it's at the right time. Heck, I wouldn't even mind if Jubilee's included in like a future MCU project with my first choice to play up being Lana Condor. She's gonna wear like the yellow jacket and everything. And anyway, that'll be it for now. And I wish you all a very happy Halloween to those celebrating. And I'll see you all in November. Take care, everyone.